Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. Tell me, from which city are you watching us today? It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when the knock came at the door. The light filtered through the living room curtains in soft golden ribbons, casting gentle patterns on the carpet. I was curled up on the couch with my tea, letting the warmth seep into my hands when I heard the familiar footsteps in the hallway. My son rarely came over unannounced, so the sound of his shoes tapping against the hardwood sent a curious flutter through my chest. When he stepped inside, there was something in his eyes, an unusual mix of hesitation and urgency. We've always been close, but this felt different. He smiled, though it was faint, almost as if he was testing whether it would reach me before the words did. "Hey, Mom," he said, dropping into the armchair across from me. His voice had that careful edge, the kind people get when they're weighing every syllable. I couldn't help but notice the way his hands fidgeted, one thumb rubbing the back of the other, his gaze darting toward the window, then back to me. We chatted idly at first. The weather. His job. The neighbor's new fence that I wasn't particularly fond of. But every word carried a current beneath it, and I could feel it tugging at me, whispering that he hadn't come here just for small talk. At one point, I leaned forward, setting my tea down on the coffee table, and asked softly, "What's really on your mind?" He exhaled sharply, the kind of breath that seems to take something out of you, and for a moment I thought he might retreat into safe conversation again. But instead he met my eyes, and in that moment the air between us shifted. His gaze softened, but his jaw tightened, as though he'd been holding something in for far too long. "I've been carrying something I haven't told you," he said, his voice trembling ever so slightly. I didn't move, didn't blink. I wanted him to know that whatever it was, I was here, steady as the walls that had sheltered him since he was a boy. My heart began to pound, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of the moment. "You remember last year, when I was going through that rough time?" he began, his voice lowering. I nodded, my chest tightening at the memory of his late-night calls, his unspoken pain seeping through every word back then. "There's more to it than I let on," he continued. "I didn't want to worry you, but what happened changed me. It made me see things differently. About life, about us." The silence in the room grew thick, as if the world itself had paused to listen. I could feel a pulse of emotion rising, yet I stayed still, allowing him the space to find his way through the tangle of whatever truth he had been guarding. When he finally said the first few words of what he'd come to tell me, my breath caught in my throat. It was like standing at the edge of a familiar path and suddenly realizing it would lead somewhere I'd never imagined. I didn't interrupt. I couldn't. I knew this was just the beginning, and whatever came next would reshape the way I saw not only my son, but myself. The clock on the wall ticked quietly, each sound a soft tap against the silence that had settled over us. I felt the weight of his words lingering in the air, heavy yet delicate, like glass that could shatter if I pushed too hard. He was leaning forward now, elbows on his knees, his fingers loosely interlaced. His eyes flickered down to his hands, then back up at me, and I could see the storm brewing there. Uncertainty, fear, and something else. Something raw. "After everything last year," he began again, "I wasn't just struggling with the usual things you might think. It went deeper. I felt lost, completely." He paused, swallowing as if the truth had a bitter taste. "I didn't tell you because I thought I could handle it. I thought it was just a phase, but it wasn't." My hands folded in my lap, and I realized I was holding my breath. I had sensed there was more to his pain back then, but I hadn't wanted to push him. Maybe I had been afraid to find out. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling a shaky laugh without humor. There were days I'd wake up and feel like the air itself was too heavy to breathe. I'd sit at work, surrounded by people, and still feel like I was in a room with no windows. His voice broke slightly. It was lonely, Mom, even when I wasn't alone. I felt a lump rise in my throat, but I stayed silent, letting him speak. This was his moment to let go of what he'd been carrying, and I knew if I interrupted, the dam might close again. He glanced at me, as if to gauge whether I was ready for the rest. I didn't want you to see me like that. You've always been the strong one, the one who holds everything together. And I didn't want to be the reason you started to fall apart. Those words pierced me deeper than I expected. To think my own child had hidden his pain to protect me, it was both heartbreak and love intertwined in the most bittersweet knot. I reached over, placing my hand gently on his. His fingers were cold, tense under my touch, but he didn't pull away. You never have to protect me from the truth, I said softly. I'd rather stand with you in the storm than imagine you weathering it alone. His lips pressed into a thin line, and his shoulders sagged as if my words had loosened a weight from them. But then his eyes shifted again, hesitant, searching. There's more, he whispered. Something happened. Someone came into my life during that time. And what they said, what they made me see, it's the reason I'm here today telling you all of this. The curiosity and unease tangled in my chest, making it hard to sit still. I tightened my grip on his hand, bracing myself. His gaze drifted to the floor, as if recalling a memory that had been burned into him. This person didn't just talk to me, he continued slowly. They challenged me. They asked questions no one else dared to. They told me things about myself I didn't even want to admit were true. And, in a way, they woke me up. I wanted to ask who it was, what exactly they had said, but something in his tone told me this was a delicate unraveling. I could sense we were only halfway to the heart of it, and pushing too soon might cause him to retreat. So I leaned back slightly, keeping my hand on his, and said only, "Go on. I'm listening." He nodded, his eyes glistening just enough to catch the light from the window. What I'm about to tell you might change how you see me, and maybe how you see yourself too. At that moment, I realized whatever revelation was coming next was going to reach deeper than either of us expected. And though a part of me feared it, a stronger part leaned in, ready to face it head-on. The room felt smaller now, as though the walls themselves had edged closer to hear what he was about to say. My son sat back in the armchair, his posture both rigid and uncertain. He took a long breath, the kind you take when you're standing at the edge of something high, and you're not sure if you should jump. "Mom," he began, his voice softer now, almost a confession. "When I was at my lowest, I met someone, not in the way you might be thinking. They weren't a friend I already had, or some casual acquaintance. They were unexpected." He looked away for a moment, his eyes settling on the bookshelf, as if one of the worn spines might give him the courage to continue. It was at this little coffee shop downtown. I'd been going there because it was quiet, not many people, and I could sit in the corner with my thoughts. One day, this older man, probably in his 70s, sat at the table next to mine. I barely noticed him at first, but he noticed me. Or maybe he noticed something about me that I couldn't hide. I stayed still, picturing the scene. My son, hunched over a cup of coffee, lost in the fog of his thoughts, and a stranger watching with an understanding gaze. He didn't start with small talk, my son continued. He just looked at me and said, "You're carrying something too heavy for one person." I didn't know how to respond. I didn't even know him. But the way he said it, it was like he'd been reading my mind. A faint shiver ran through me, not from fear, but from the uncanny precision of those words. I knew that sometimes the smallest sentences could crack open the largest truths. He kept talking, my son said. He told me about his own life, about mistakes he made, people he lost, times he thought there was no point in going on. And then he said something that stuck in my head for months. Your life isn't just yours. It's tied to the people who love you. When you disappear from yourself, you disappear from them too. I felt a lump forming in my throat. Those words had a quiet weight, a truth that cut deep without shouting. At first, I didn't believe him, my son admitted. I thought he was just some lonely old man trying to make conversation. But then I started noticing how right he was. I'd been pulling away from everyone, especially you. I told myself it was to protect you, but really, it was me hiding, because I didn't want to see the disappointment in your eyes if you knew how badly I was struggling. I blinked slowly, my fingers curling against my knee. You've never been a disappointment to me, I said quietly, though I wasn't sure if he even heard me over the rush of his own thoughts. He rubbed his palms together slowly, his gaze far away. The thing is, Mom, that man didn't just talk to me once. He came back, day after day. Sometimes we barely spoke, just sat there drinking coffee. Other times, he'd share little pieces of wisdom about forgiveness, about facing yourself in the mirror without flinching. And every time it was like he was putting something back into me that I'd been missing. I could feel the anticipation building in my chest, the sense that there was something more, something that connected this stranger to the reason my son had come here today. Then one afternoon, he said, his voice trembling just slightly, he asked me a question I wasn't ready for. He asked me if there was one thing, one truth, I'd never told the person I loved most. And I knew he meant you. The room seemed to still completely, no sound but the faint ticking of the clock. I leaned forward without meaning to, my pulse in my ears. I didn't answer him that day, my son continued, his eyes locking onto mine now. But I've been carrying that question ever since, and it's why I'm here. Something in my chest tightened, and I knew we were standing on the threshold of a truth I wasn't sure I was ready to hear. But ready or not, it was coming. I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips, a deep, steady thud that seemed to echo in the quiet. My son's gaze didn't waver, and I realized in that moment that whatever he was about to say was going to change something between us, not break it, but alter it in a way that meant we could never go back to the exact way we were before. He took another slow breath, his hands clasped tightly together, as if holding on to the last bit of courage he needed. The truth I never told you is that there was a time last year when I didn't think I'd be here anymore. Not just in your living room. Not here. At all. The words hit me like a sudden drop in temperature, my breath catching in my throat. I didn't move, but inside, something cracked open, a sharp ache spreading through my chest. He looked down, his voice trembling. I woke up one morning, and I just couldn't see a reason to keep going. Everything felt heavy, and it wasn't just sadness. It was like being trapped underwater, watching life happen above me, unable to break through the surface. I thought about ending it. A tear slipped down his cheek before he could brush it away. That day, I walked into the coffee shop, not even knowing why. And that man, James, his name is James, he was there. He looked at me like he knew. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just said, "Sit down." And for the first time in weeks, I did what someone else told me to do without arguing. We sat there for hours, barely talking, but somehow, I'd walked out feeling a little less ready to disappear. I felt my own tears welling, but I didn't want them to spill just yet. My hands itched to reach for him, but I waited, knowing he needed to say it all. James told me later, my son continued, that he'd seen that look before, in friends, in strangers, even in himself. He said he wasn't going to let me be another person he wished he'd spoken to sooner. And that's when I realized something, Mom. You would have been the one left behind, wondering, blaming yourself. And I couldn't let that happen. So I fought. I fought because of you. His voice cracked, and I could no longer hold back. I reached forward, my hands closing over his, pulling him toward me. He didn't resist. Instead, he leaned into the space between us, his forehead nearly touching mine. You have no idea, I whispered, how much you mean to me. There's no version of this world I want to live in without you. My voice shook, but I didn't care. If you ever feel that way again, ever, you come to me. You don't carry it alone. Do you hear me? He nodded, his eyes red but steady now. I hear you. For a long while, we just sat there, the afternoon light shifting across the room as the day slowly leaned toward evening. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was full, warm, alive. It was the kind of quiet that comes after a storm, when the air smells clean and every sound feels sharper, more precious. Before he left, my son said one more thing. James told me that the strongest people aren't the ones who carry everything without breaking. They are the ones who let someone else carry part of it. I think I finally understand what he meant. I walked him to the door, my hand resting on his arm, feeling the solid, warm reality of him. As he stepped out into the fading light, I realized something too. He had come here to tell me a truth, but he'd given me something else. Something I would hold on to for the rest of my life. The reminder that even in our darkest moments, the love we share can be the lifeline that pulls us back to the surface. And as the door closed behind him, I stood there for a long time, breathing in the quiet, feeling both the ache of what could have been and the unshakable gratitude for what still was.